Hello and welcome to this codechallenge.dev architecture and overview. Look at the code behind the code. Obviously, this is no substitute for diving in yourself, but hopefully gives you a little bit of a taste of how the code works and how the various pieces come together, and kind of guides you through how to look at it. So I've divided this into three different parts. First, the user interface and the front end usage of the system. And finally, the code behind the system, and then the infrastructure itself. So first, let's take a look at the front end. The site's hosted at codechallenge.dev. There's also documentation hosted at docs.codechallenge.dev. And to log into the code challenge itself, all you need is your GitLab.com user account. So most users will, just log in to join challenges, but you can also log in order to create challenges. And so now you've got myself logged in here. If I wasn't already logged into GitLab, it would walk me through that. If I didn't have a GitLab account, it could make me do that. So I can add a new challenge if I want by clicking Create Challenge. You can give your challenge a name that's going to display publicly alongside the description. You should also choose a short name, which makes the URL short for joining the challenge. It's more meaningful, something like KubeCon NA22. You can feature the challenge on the homepage using this feature checkbox. This will feature the most recent challenge only. So when setting up for a new conference, you'll want to be sure to edit the previous challenge, remove the featured flag before then featuring the most recent challenge. And lastly, you'll need a start and end date and two additional links. One, you'll need the GitLab project on gitlab.com that's going to be associated with this challenge. This is the project that codechallenge.dev will use to check against the API for completion of the challenge. And then you'll also need a link to the handbook to the terms for the specific challenge that folks will have to agree to. And once that challenge has been created, you'll be able to see it under My Challenges. And then other folks will be able to see it under the Active Challenges tab on the homepage, or from the join link, which is going to be codechallenge.dev/J for join / the short name that you selected. So for example, we look at this KubeCon NA22 challenge. The URL was codechallenge.dev/J/KubeCon22. And in this challenge page, you'll see the number of entrants who have completed each level. You'll see if a new challenge is created, you won't have any levels, and you'll be able to add a new level with this Add New Level button. And then each level needs a title and description. Typically in the description, you want to link to any relevant documentation. You'll need to select a type. So there's two working types right now. That's the merge request and the manually verified type. The merge request type can have elements about what string that merge request might have to contain in order to be valid for the challenge, and maybe a hash or a hash that the merge request will have to be after. So the hash of a commit that the commit from the merge request has to be after in order to count. To learn more about this, you can see the documentation at docs.codechallenge.com. Or you can use previous challenges like this one as an example. Also on the challenge page, you can go to settings, as we were just doing, to modify all of the things that you entered about that challenge. You can see here all of the description, etc. And then you can also go to the details to see all the entrants for the challenge. And on this page, you can also manually verify any ones that need to get manually verified. So if I click this edit button, you'll see that I can check off that someone completed a challenge. You can also rerun the automated checks with the update scoring button right here. And you can also promote folks to admin on the challenge. That challenge admins will then have access to this details page and be able to make these kind of manual adjustments. And then finally, you can also view the link to the challenge leaderboard. That'll be right here on the challenge homepage. I'm going to open that in a new tab. On the challenge leaderboard, you can either view by the time, as in the most recently completed, or by level. And the challenge leaderboard will also be set to refresh automatically every 30 seconds by default. But you can change that and completely disable the refreshing right up here in the corner. So that's designed to be displayed on a large TV or a monitor at the booth, during a trade show. Great. So next, let's take a look at the code behind the challenge. So here I've got the code challenge code opened up. It's a Node.js application that uses the kind of traditional Node.js pattern of server-side generated templates that are written in the handlebars syntax. And then the main app runs when running npm.start. So we see the package.json here. When we run npm.start, it runs this bin www script. That brings in, the server on a specified port or on port 3000 if you're just in local development, and runs the app.js file, which if you've had any experience with Node, you'll recognize as a pretty vanilla Node app. First, it brings in some various libraries we need for connecting to things like Slack, to GitLab, other places. It registers a number of helpers that we're going to use in handlebars to manipulate data. And then it's mostly standard Node.js backend code there. We've divided routes into several files here just to kind of break them into logical sections. Those are all stored in the routes folder. So if we look at the routes folder here, most of these routes are public. And then under this app section are the protected routes that are protected via Express Open ID Connect. So if we scroll up here, the index, you can see this requires auth function from Express Open ID Connect. That's the kind of middleware that we use for authorization with GitLab.com. And the app section then kind of repeats this pattern of separating routes into files. So let's look at that challenge homepage we were just on, right? So if I go to challenge, you can see here that's in the format /challenge/ID. And so the URL for that page would be codechallenge.dev/app, right? We're under app /challenge/ the number, where that number is the database ID for the challenge. So we look back here real quick, we can see, yep, codechallenge.dev/app/challenge/7, right? That's the database ID for that. So in that code, we get the ID from that URL. And then after we get that ID, we use that against various parts of the DB model to get different things from the database. And then we transform that data a little bit, and then we use that data to render the app/challenge template. And all of the templates are stored under the views folder here. So we can find that template at views, app, challenge. And we can see that template using the data that we sent to render in that page. Next, let's look at that database module we were talking about. That's all under this DB folder right here. It separates out different parts of the database into different areas. And for more information on the database layout, it's a Postgres database, but you can see the database.md file. Let's open that real quick. And that has some details around all the different entities that are involved in the database. So as an example, let's take a look at the challenge controller in the database. So if we go to challenges, here we have various methods. Get all to get all of the challenges, get details to get the details of a specific user's challenge, get by ID to get a single challenge ID. And you can see, various others here for creating and modifying challenges. And for something like getting a challenge by ID, you can see we don't just simply return select the challenge, but we also join together a few other tables here, relevant for this model. So this is, in this case, the GL projects data table mostly that gets GitLab project information related to the project for this challenge. Other folders, if we look at the top level here, we've looked at routes and Debian views, but they include a lib folder for a variety of library functions we do for things like calculating scores, those handlebar helpers we talked about, other common functions that are used in more than one place in the app will be factored out here. We also have the public directory that contains all the static assets and images that we're serving in the Node application. We use Sass for the CSS creation, so we can see the details of that here. And then there's this docs folder, which is actually an entire Apollo project in and of itself, where the docs stuff is located. You'll also notice this data directory, which has some JSON data. So this was an original plan to allow for offline static data when running disconnected from the internet somewhere. As this requirement never really materialized in real life, we haven't finished that feature. And so that's kind of a high-level overview of the code and the layout. Hopefully it gives you some context when you're looking at the code of the application. Of note, to run it locally, there's several things you will need, including Postgres and some environmental variables for things like connecting to the GitLab API and a few other items. And these required variables will be discussed as part of the infrastructure discussion, which is next up. All right, so finally, let's take a look at the infrastructure we run CodeChallenge.dev on. The production application is run entirely in GCP within the group-community group and project. And you can see this detailed information about the architecture and the various pieces used in the architecture.md file. So let's take a look at that as we walk through. Here we see at the top a diagram of the various pieces involved. First, let's look at the quick side. That's the docs site. Requests for docs.codechallenge.dev have their DNS routed to via GCP Cloud DNS to the GitLab pages for this project, the Code Challenge project. And this is deployed from the GitLab CI YAML from that docs subfolder that we saw. For CodeChallenge.dev, that DNS points instead to GCP App Engine for the group community project inside of GCP. This App Engine has a running copy or multiple running copies of the Node.js app that we were looking at just previously. And that app then connects to a Postgres database in GCP Cloud SQL for all of its data needs. The app also connects through OAuth or OpenID Connect to GitLab.com for sign-in, as well as the GitLab API to check for level completion. For App Engine, there's a number of secrets required. Those are stored in the app_env YAML file that we didn't check into Git. This file is stored as a base64 encoded variable in the project for deployment. And also the details are stored in the marketing 1Password secure note about Code Challenge. There's also variables in there for the connection to Cloud SQL. There's also a cron.yaml file that deploys a Cloud Run task that runs every 5 minutes. This is also deployed from GitLab CI/CD as defined in the GitLab CI YAML, and that is checking the scores every 5 minutes. And then finally note that the service user for the deployment is pretty critical. That credentials for that are also stored as a base64 encoded string in a protected variable in the GitLab CI/CD variables. All right, so I hope that overview has been useful, but remember, don't be afraid to experiment. This project was a lot of fun to build, but you note from the presentation and from issues here in the GitLab project that there's plenty of work to be done with it, and lots of work that can be done to improve it and make it even more valuable for GitLab and our community. Remember, everyone can contribute. Thanks so much.